Hey, happy Friday. This week Apple launched their C1 chip, which is a pretty big deal. Amazon killed off their own Android App Store, and Humane imploded in a really weird way. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video was sponsored by NordVPN. Okay, for my first story of the week, Apple finally has its very own 5G modem. It's called the C1 chip and it came in the newly launched iPhone 16e, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Now, modems on most Android phones are typically integrated into the SoC to reduce latency and increase efficiency, but based on the presentation, it looks like Apple actually kept theirs as a separate chip, which is in addition to a standard A18 SoC. But still, Apple claims that they have the best power efficiency of any modem, being 25% more efficient than the iPhone 15. Yes, the iPhone 15, not the 16, which is a really weird comparison. And I also think that they might be a little bit tricky with the language here because maybe the modem itself is really efficient, but then its connection to the SoC is not as efficient because it's not inside the SoC. But anyway, it's still an impressive feat. Also, a little bit suspicious is that Apple didn't actually make any claims over speeds. We know it doesn't have millimeter wave support, it only does cellular, so no Wi-Fi, no GPS, no Bluetooth, etc. And it's also reported that the modem was made by TSMC using a combination of a 4nm and a 7nm process. So none of this sounds super high-end and we'll have to wait for the final reviews, but Apple now has its very own modem and they've actually hinted at wanting to integrate this into other product categories as well. So maybe the Mac, the Vision Pro, the iPad, who knows? We also know that it has worldwide bands and satellite connectivity, which is pretty good for a first-gen product, and either way, it's a huge deal for Apple. Analysts estimate that Qualcomm makes 20% of its entire revenue from selling wireless chips to Apple, and given that in 2024 they earned $39 billion, there'll be $7 to $8 billion coming from Apple alone each year. Apple is ironically either Qualcomm's biggest client or pretty close to it, despite also being the biggest competitor to Qualcomm's Snapdragon chips. Qualcomm and Apple also famously hate each other, and some Qualcomm PR people were already out and pretty salty. Sasha here, for example, said that, quote, "It's called the iPhone 16e because that's what your network status indicator is gonna say." Yikes, if anything, that sounds like somebody's being a sore loser, not pretty. Qualcomm's technology licensing agreement with Apple expires in 2027, and Qualcomm itself is only expecting that its modems will be used in about 20% of Apple's line for the 2026 launch. So if the modems end up being good, they could be a major win for Apple. Big if though. Okay, for my second story of the week, Amazon remembered that it has an App Store on Android and then killed it. You know, that really popular App Store that you and I and everyone else has been using all this time, that's the one. Its time has come. Specifically, it's being shut down in August 2025 after 14 years of trying and failing, which is following the announcement of the Amazon App Store on Windows getting discontinued as well. Now, importantly, we think that it's going to keep working on Amazon's own devices like the Fire TV and the Fire tablets, but it will stop existing as a third-party app store that anyone can download and use as Google's biggest corporate competitor. Google has just argued in its antitrust case with Epic Games that Amazon's existence as an app store meant that the Play Store was totally not a monopoly at all, and I bet that they're really happy that the lawsuit is over now. Anyway, the timing of this is particularly odd as the EU has just made it easier for alternative app stores, as Altstore PAL and the Epic Game Store, for example, have just demonstrated, but yeah, Amazon has decided to say goodbye. Okay, and for my third story of the week, the Humane debacle finally came to a rather bizarre end by the company being bought by HP for $116 million. Someone in my community said that that's because HP now stands for Humane Pin. But yeah, the company handled this shutdown just as terribly as they did basically everything else with this cursed project. The firms announced no refunds for anyone buying their device more than 90 days ago, which is pretty much everyone, of course. And there's also no way to keep using the AI pen for anything except for offline features like battery level? Okay, even grammatically that doesn't make any sense. The last estimate that I've seen is that Humane has sold $9 million worth of these, but HP, a billion-dollar company, is choosing not to pay any of that back and to just keep the money for themselves. Well, of course. I usually don't like shitting on new projects just for the sake of it, but these guys make it very hard to feel any sympathy for them. Humane raised something like $250 million, so in the end they were bought for less than the cash that they were given, and they'll work at, quote, a new division at HP to help integrate artificial intelligence into the company's personal computers, printers, and connected conference rooms. Which, of course, the internet has already shown to be a very funny idea. Oh well. Moving on to our release monitor, we start with what else but the iPhone 16e. You already know about its modem and its A18 chip, but there's also a new design and a pretty flagship looking 48 megapixel camera. I like that they added one good lens instead of two mediocre ones, but the phone now inexplicably costs $600. That is 40% more than its predecessor. Compared to a regular iPhone 16, you're losing MagSafe, fast wireless charging, the extra cameras, ultra-wideband for finding your AirTags, a Thread chip, advanced camera controls, photographic styles, the newer ceramic shield and more, and you also only start with 128 gigs of storage. I mean, it's probably still good enough for most people who just want a cheaper iPhone, but I find the price a little bit surprising. And the only explanation that I can come up with is that they might be giving themselves some room for tariffs, and especially tariffs in the future. I mean, they probably already have to pay 10% if they're imported from China, which I think they are, and then there might also be more tariffs in the future, so they might be baking that into the price right now. That's a wild guess, or they just decided to charge more. Anyway, moving on to the Apple of Germany, Vorwerk announced its next iPhone-level excitement device, the Thermomix TM7. And I'm only half joking here because loads of people somehow really do freak out about these. It's still an all-in-one semi-robotic kitchen gadget that will prepare tons of different foods by itself and is also inexplicably popular across the globe, and it now comes with a new look, a gigantic touchscreen and more. Just for fun, I also checked and the company makes 3.2 billion euros every year, of which more than half they do by selling just this one type of gadget alone, so really loads of people are buying these. Insane. And also this week, DJI announced the RS4 Mini, which is a gimbal that can stabilize both phones and cameras and also track moving people. Looks pretty nice. And in weird announcements, Oppo did the global launch for its Find N5 foldable, but then the global launch did not include North America or Europe. Anyway, the phone measures at just 8.93 millimeters when folded, which is just half a millimeter thicker than an iPhone 16 Pro Max, for example, while also having a massive 5,600 mAh battery. That is super impressive. And last in our release monitor was Amazon announcing their new Wi-Fi 7 routers called the Eero 7 and the Eero Pro 7. These deliver wireless speeds of up to 1.8 gigabits and 3.9 gigabits respectively, and they're a little bit cheaper than the Eero Max 7 routers. As usual, all the links to the newly announced products are down in the description, and now onto the brief, which starts with potential doom. Specifically, the asteroid that could hit Earth in 2032 keeps seeing its percentage odds of a clash with Earth going up. Fun! Now we're still waiting for new data from the James Webb Telescope before we decide to actually panic, but you know, maybe?
Without knowing precisely what the danger is, would you say it's time for our viewers to crack each other's heads open and feast on the goo inside? Yes, I would.
And in more things that I can't be bothered to understand precisely, Microsoft announced Majorana 1, its first quantum computer that uses the Majorana particle instead of electrons. They say they can potentially fit millions of qubits into the chip this way, though today they only have 8. After apparently 17 years of research, Microsoft says that it has created an entirely new state of matter, which is not a solid, liquid, or gas, but a topological state. Which, yeah, big words. And next, Affinity, my preferred app suite to replace Adobe Photoshop and more, got a big update with 2.6. This brought loads of new features and for the first time ever AI integrations using local models, which you can download if you want to manually, and these can do things like help you select objects much faster. It's a free update, so yay, I guess. Then in shipping news, Hyundai said that it was planning to make nuclear energy powered container ships, which is a type of propulsion that has previously been restricted to military ships. So far, Hyundai has shown off a design that has received approval from various shipping bureaus, but it still needs more work to become real. And also in industrial news, the rather tragic story of the collapse of Northvolt continues. This was supposed to be Europe's battery savior, but they recently filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and we've just heard that they're now selling their heavy industrial battery business to the Swedish truck brand Scania. Scania had pretty massive electric truck plants that all hinged on Northvolt, and they're now hoping that they can take control of this division and ramp up production for themselves in Sweden. And just a random recommendation here, there's this YouTube channel called The Electric Trucker, which is just a random dude who drives an electric Scania and he vlogs himself in the meanwhile. It is extremely relaxing, one of my favorite channels recently, and it is linked down in the description if you want to see it. Anyway, in talking of stuff to watch, The Last of Us Season 2 was announced to be premiering on the 13th of April, which is pretty soon, and the first episode of The White Lotus's new season based in Thailand just aired this week on HBO and Max as well. I love the White Lotus, so that's a recommendation from me, and since I wasn't at home while watching, I actually had to use my sponsor, NordVPN. I just came back from a trip and NordVPN was a lifesaver there in general. It let me watch all of my shows and services like Disney Plus that were simply not loading in multiple countries while traveling. It helped me unblock Signal during my layover in Qatar, which is normally blocked there. It helped me use a bunch of my finance apps, which refused to load properly in Malaysia, for example, but worked just fine using NordVPN, and I could go on, but as a techie, you already know what a VPN does. And happily enough, in my experience, Nord is a great one. They provide rock-solid connectivity using thousands of servers, you can choose from tons of different countries and sometimes even specific cities, and speeds are so fast that you can't even tell that your VPN is on. You can connect multiple devices with a single plan, and NordVPN is also very secure with your traffic being properly encrypted. With my link nordvpn.com/Friday checkout, which is also linked in the description, you can get 4 extra months for free if you choose a 2-year plan, plus there's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in giving it a try. Again, that is nordvpn.com/Friday checkout, and I'll see you next Friday.